Hi, folks. No Jimmy Hutton today. He's still out trying to earn a coin. Got Stuart Lockhead with me.
Hi there.
And I'm Norrie Stewart. We're going to briefly cover PMQs and the presser, and then we'll have a general, quite wide-sweeping chat. I think there's quite a few interesting articles popped up on our timelines today. PMQs. What did you think?
Easy. Fascinating. Lord Thurso. Was it Lord Thurso or is it Jamie Stone? He's not Lord Thurso. It's a different fella. Anyway, we're talking about the Lib Dem MP for the very far north of Scotland, mainland. I don't want to criticise the people that live up there, but they do elect some real weirdos to be their MP. Anyway, you would have thought, judging by the question asked by Jamie Stone, he got that sort of random first opposition question before Keir Starmer, this official opposition, get to ask a question. He just said, oh, isn't it wonderful we've got a space rocket launch site set up in my constituency. And isn't that wonderful? So, of course, that's all that Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, wanted to hear. And he, oh, yeah, that was lovely. Yeah, whatever he said, I went in one ear and the other. What was he going?
230 local jobs. It sounded like a planted Tory question.
Absolutely.
And it really wasn't a question.
It wasn't. And then there was a genuine Tory with another question. And it was, oh, well, I don't know what it was. It was about his constituency or something. I've just written down here PISH against both of them because there was no point writing down what they actually asked about.
I wonder if we're going to start seeing Scottish unionist politicians, of which there are, what, 4?
Well, there's 6 Tories. Oh, there's a couple of Lib Dems and 1 Labour.
Right, so there's actually 9. I wonder if they're going to start doing, aren't the union doing a wonderful job for us, Prime Minister stuff?
I wish you hadn't brought up the unionist MPs. Have you just seen the latest news? Scottish Tories' latest dark money purchase. They've just hired a video team. Don't ask where the cash is coming from. Scottish Conservative leader Douglas Ross has appointed former STV, Scottish Sun and Sunday Mail journalist Russell Finlay to head up a new communications team.
So basically 50% of their team, well, no, not in reality, their whole team, it'll be 30% of their whole team is journalists to spin the PR for them with their 6 MPs and their 3 strong comms team.
Will they not be based in Queen Elizabeth's house, or is that going to be a bit of a
I'm not actually
embarrassing?
I'm not sure the Tories will be allowed to use Queen Elizabeth House as their Tory HQ, although it wouldn't surprise me.
So it'll be along at Melville Crescent, or
I think so. I think they might be moving.
Ooh.
I think I saw somewhere they're moving premises to
a
small garage in Pilton.
No, wait a minute, you're right. Let me get this right. Northumberland Street or Cumberland Street is the Tory office. Melville Crescent is the Secretary of State's office.
Which will be moving to New Street.
Moving into Queen Elizabeth House. Ah, right. It's a bit of a guddle, isn't it? Anyway, they've now got their own camera team by the looks of it. How nice.
Well, we can expect a lot of fake news out of that, no doubt.
What else can I say while you're thinking?
Well, I was just about to say Keir Starmer's, again, I mean, it's like watching a man take on a boy. Keir Starmer asks quite easy to understand, straightforward questions, and Boris Johnson stumbles his way through the undergrowth trying to avoid answering them. I mean, his major answer today on every question Keir Starmer asked was, oh, I really think you as a Labour opposition should be supporting everything my government does. No,
I don't. Keir Starmer's first question was a conflict between what the Prime Minister had said about testing. It was this new test and trace system that they were setting up was going to be a game changer, the single most important thing we've done. And then apparently the other day he said testing doesn't matter anymore because you know, he was embarrassed.
But
And he doesn't.
But that just shows his inabilities, because when he said testing doesn't matter, the question was about effective ways of not dealing with but curing the virus. It was quite a legitimate answer. All he had to say was, well, trace and testing doesn't cure the virus. It's a way to fight the virus, but he's not quick enough on his feet to even remember why he answered the way he answered a day ago.
And he's worse than that. Twice he used inappropriate words. He called it an epidemic. It's not an epidemic, it's a pandemic. If you think it's just an epidemic, no wonder you're getting it wrong, Boris. And then also, he was doing a Trumpian thing, kept calling it when it was his turn to mention test and trace, it's the NHS test and trace every time he's obviously got it highlighted in yellow in front of him. When you mention test and trace, call it NHS test and trace, even though it's Deloitte and Serco and G4S and all these other.
Yeah. I mean, it was a complete waste of time. I mean, it's an exercise in deflection and spinning, and an excuse for him basically to make a wee speech, as you said earlier, after Starmer's last question. He gets his chance to make a wee speech about how wonderful everything is as people drop dead on the Tory benches behind him from COVID. Total. I mean, I'm exasperated. I'm beginning to wonder why we bother watching this.
Look, yeah, well, that's fair. Look, obviously somebody had also told them how good Nicola Sturgeon was, and her final paragraph as she signed off. Don't forget, she followed him last night on national TV, and she was far more impressive. She was sat in her proper office, or it certainly looked like her proper office, with a desk the size of Donald Trump's at the White House. and she was being given plaudits today because of her final words, which were very sympathetic. So Boris said today, what did he say? These are tough times, da da da. We will get through this. And then he couldn't resist it. He did a Trump thing again. He couldn't resist having a stupid attack at the shadow education secretary. He attacked this person, I don't know who it is, and accused him of saying, don't let a crisis go to waste.
He obviously, nobody is smart enough in his office to explain to him that he should not be making the attacks. He shouldn't be making the attacks. He has other minions to do that. But I think possibly because of his journalistic experience, he can't resist the wee turn of phrase, the wee snidey dig. He looks less and less competent day by day, the more we see of him. And then, of course, he was followed by Nicola Sturgeon at her press conference. And I think you made the point about the hyena pack being fully fed and baying for blood today.
Well, can I just say, no, they weren't fed. They were they hadn't had their lunch. That's why they were so rabid. They were looking for red meat, as they would say, wouldn't they? They were all at it today, the regulars. I'm not going to attack we got the BBC, but they did all ask awkward questions. What did she want? Lisa Summers, what did she want to know? Data. They wanted to, can you identify where the data, where the virus is being spread with detail? And of course, no, we can't really. But
well, she seemed to be looking for the addresses of the houses where infection had taken place.
Exactly, but they do know it's in house to house, inside houses, and in hospitality. And she pointed out also, speaking generally at the start, but this is where they tried to attack her, that if she had had the powers simply to borrow money, she would have actually probably, I'm not saying would have, closed the pubs, not the restaurants, but closed the pubs.
That was what many of them were fishing for. They wanted her to turn around and say, I'll shut the pubs. And what would have been printed wouldn't have been, if I get the money and I can protect the jobs and the businesses, I'll shut the pubs.
Well, that was already what they did. I'd forget, I think it was the Herald, the headline. I saw the Herald's front page. Misery for families, I think it was the headline. Lockdown misery for families. Well, to start with, it's not a lockdown, because if it was a lockdown, you wouldn't be allowed to travel anywhere, but there's no travel ban. You can go to Timbuktu right now if you want.
Well, there's a recommendation not to travel.
Yeah, but there's not a travel ban. And the idea that it's miserable for families, well, what about all the people that suddenly sat like me, have got a sigh of relief because vulnerable, not yourself, not even, poof, we're feeling a wee bit better because it's getting quite dangerous out there again.
That wasn't entirely my reaction, I have to say. My first thought was, damn, I'm not going to see my daughter or my grandson for weeks. But apparently that's not the case because of what they do for me.
Yeah,
anyway.
Well, that's the point. If you've got a bubble,
yeah,
working, and if you've grannies doing your babysitting, your child minding, that's fine, and as well, all these kind of things. The sensible things, and they've worked these things out now, haven't they?
Yes, yeah, and I think that's the other difference that everybody's ignored, that Scotland has attempted to leave the under 12s with some life. They can play with their mates with no restrictions. England hasn't done that. Under 12s.
And a special dispensation for the 12 to 18s, 12 to 17-year-olds, basically. They can go out, they can meet.
Sixes.
Up to 6 of them at a time, social distancing. Yeah. They've got to not have a huddle with a rugby ball on Portobello Beach that I saw last week.
Well, I mean, I think if you actually look at what the Scottish Government have done, they've obviously said least risk group under 12s, give them a bit more freedom. They're kids, difficult anyway to police their behaviour. 12 to 18-year-olds, again, low risk group. Let them have a bit more freedom. Let them, you're not going to be able to stop it because they're at school anyway, but let them meet out with school in groups of 6. And then you get to the pub situation, groups of 6 of 2 households. So you can actually go and speak to somebody that wasn't in your house all week. No, it looks thought out when you break it down. Her chat over the last few weeks about balancing risk looks like it's been applied sensibly to what's been asked of people. And the adults in the room are being asked not to go in anybody else's room, essentially.
And the stats today, the data she led her press briefing with, were fairly savage. 486 extra positive cases.
Biggest positive daily.
Biggest since the start. Bigger than back in March and April.
Yeah.
And the percentage of those tested, 7.8%. She did suggest that the number of 486, partially because they're testing many more people than they were back in March and April. So, but you could...
Which jumping forward, if you don't mind, brings me on to, I think, 2 things that are related to this. One, Robin McAlpine's piece that I think you sent me on.
He's going on about, I mean, the outline of his piece is right in a sense that because a lot of the tests to go to a lab are, even if they're just going to the lab in Glasgow, that lab in Glasgow is run by the UK government, and they're only being allocated a smaller percentage than the population of Scotland in that lab for Scottish tests.
Right, wait a minute. Let me go through this again. You cannot, it is impossible and of very little use, test every single person in Scotland. You couldn't do it in a 24-hour period unless everybody was trained to test themselves. And it would only be relevant at the point at which you took the test.
What's this on? Brought this on, Norrie? I don't get you.
Well, McAlpine seemed to be asking for everybody to be tested.
Well, was he? I didn't see that part
Well,
of it.
that's the way I read it. He then proceeded to say there is no testing of the general population. I'm sorry, has he not been watching any of the pressers? The way they generally test the population is NHS Scottish labs take the blood samples that are taken from people in Scotland randomly for other reasons and test them. They then extrapolate that into how many people in the population have got the virus. I mean, does he really seriously expect everybody to be tested?
I think all he was looking for was another reason to go for independence.
All he was looking for, Stuart, is really simple. Is he wants Nicola Sturgeon to turn around and say, stick your UK-wide testing up your jacksie. We'll do it all in NHS labs.
Well, which we're not capable of.
Enough to do.
I mean, on the other side of the coin, there is an argument that the test and protect contact teams depend on the results coming back from the labs in good time to get hold of to do the contacting, and therefore get people to self-isolate and to clamp down on outbreaks. So,
okay, here's a suggestion for you. Short of training everybody in the country to do tests in labs, how do we hit hotspots? How do we have a sensible balanced number of laboratory capability so that when there's a flare-up in London, they can get all the tests they need, or when there's a flare-up in Aberdeen, we can get all the tests we need. Well, what we do is have capacity over the whole UK.
You're right, because when there was a period a few months ago when they were sending samples, we'll call them, of potentially infected people, but they were sending some of this stuff to America, and then more recently to Germany, labs here, because they couldn't cope in the UK. So you're kind of right.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, even if Scotland was independent, it would be sensible to coordinate as large a testing number of labs as possible, European-wide, so that if there was a flare-up in Spain, British capacity that wasn't needed could be used to help Spain. It's part of the, it's an entirely sensible thing to do. The bigger the scope of your lab capacity, the better, so that it can be utilized for the areas that need it most, because it is not blanket across the UK at the same level. I mean, I just don't think he thought about it.
You happy now?
Well, I think he wrote the article with how do I differentiate Scotland from the rest of the UK? Oh, I'll hang it on this hook. Yeah. I really don't think he thought about it.
Fair enough. Right, where were we? We were back at the presser, weren't we? She'd announced 486 positive ones. The extra deaths, normally we get them on a Wednesday. This is from National Registers of Scotland. What did they come up with? 11 extra deaths, whereas up against, I think it was 7 by the daily system. So there was no huge shocks there. But what was a shock was out of those 486 extra positive tests for one day, it's largely student outbreaks, and mostly Glasgow University. Was it Glasgow University? Yes.
Well, I think she missed when she was questioned on this. She had the opportunity to say, well, no, it was Monica Lennon, sorry, in the BBC 5 minutes to the opposition to smear the First Minister spot that they've now introduced. Monica Lennon said something about other countries having walk-in facilities because students don't have cars. And nobody brought up the fact that St Andrews has got a walk-in, and I believe Glasgow University is opening on Thursday, something like that. So the walk-in facility is up and running and being put in place. So either Monica Lennon doesn't know anything about it, or is prepared to attack attack the First Minister on lies, essentially. I find it quite annoying.
I think we need to roast the BBC, because it's totally clunky what they've done. They've got less than 30 minutes of an hour and a half long press briefing, typically, that is available on the BBC TV Scotland channel, as opposed to the BBC One channel.
What they've essentially done is cut down Nicola Sturgeon's opportunity to explain things and be questioned by the press, other than themselves.
In public, yeah.
Because they get the first or the second question at these pressers. I suggest that Nicola Sturgeon moves their question to about 12:50, 12:55, and see what happens then.
Wow, there's a plan. Get the BBC. They don't get to ask a question. I bet, but it's all done in seniority. You can tell, you know.
Yeah, but that, I mean, just move it one day. Just forget to ask them, and don't ask it until about 10 to 1, and see what the reaction to that is.
I like that one. I like that.
I mean, it's useless. It's a waste of time. It's a platform for opposition MPs to basically politicize it, because they don't know as much as she knows. So they couldn't stand up and be questioned by the press the way she is every day. And that's no fault of theirs. They're not in government. They don't have all the answers at their fingertips. But they're only there to criticize.
I saw DRoss, Douglas Ross, live last night, quite late, maybe about 9 o'clock. It was dark, and he was on the grass outside Westminster. I don't know. They don't seem to have their tents at the moment. And he was offered the chance to rubbish the First Minister, and he didn't, which was quite interesting. I think yesterday was a different story. Of course, they were, I think the UK4, as I've got them called, had agreed to try and just cooperate and provide a united front for yesterday.
The Tories politically have got to be crapping it in Scotland, because if it turns out that the watered down lockdown that Boris Johnson, partial lockdown Boris Johnson has introduced in England fails, and the more stringent lockdown in Scotland succeeds, they're not going to have a leg to stand on. So they can only basically say bland things about the Scottish position until they start seeing results.
But anyway, it was surprisingly, didn't pick on the First Minister at all, or the SNP, just he was invited to, I forget what show it was on. Sometimes you watch too much TV, don't you? It just occurred to me, because I'm looking at myself there, and it's not myself I'm looking at, of course, doing nothing is not an option. That still applies. It's not out of date yet. However, if I'd had more time, I would have put up a different background with the fact that there is a Ipsos Mori poll. Admittedly, it's not a huge number for Scotland. It's only a sample.
Subset.
But it does show that support for the SNP has now reached 60%.
Interesting. I think we should finish the presser on a wee clip. Well, it's quite a long clip, but it's well worth the watching.
I just savage one or two journalists first. What was it? Who shall I have a go at? All right. The Times fellow, Mark McAlpine, he got scalped. I'm not even going to bother telling you what it was about.
Well, I'm going to show you in the clip.
Oh, very good.
Do you want that now?
Yes, more.
Okay, here we go. This is the Times.
Being very ethical.
Getting tell. Oh dear. Wait a minute.
Is the first problem. The second problem, that's not how we live. And how do you achieve that practically? For a long period of time.
Section of the population, which would have to be a big section.
Differences be to March.
I've lost
just
it.
to clarify, are you saying today that you can't give us the evidence?
Problems, gastro problems.
Oh, sorry.
I just don't think that stands up.
That must have been you had you also had that what's it, Lavelle.
I had it set up and I've lost it.
Not to worry, but I'll tell you what, he got scalped. He tried to, he gave us this long story. He tried to build this connection between when the First Minister was Minister of Health and they turned down some very expensive drugs for use in Scotland. And to start with, she was accused of, well, how do you find that ethical about the current situation? I'm not even going to try and make any sense out of what they really said. But she turned around and scalped him good. She said, look, when I was health minister, the health minister doesn't make the decisions about any drugs that get supplied in the NHS in Scotland. There's an independent panel.
Yes, well, effectively what
right in his ear.
What he did was he said, you acted unethically by denying these drugs, and yet you're arguing about the ethics of shielding older people. And how that wouldn't work. And she put the boot right in. Explained to him how the Scottish system for picking drugs for the NHS had nothing to do with ministers, and it was clinicians who made those decisions, and that the ethics of Leach was very good. He was given a chance to answer that, and he basically laid it out and cut it to ribbons.
I'm looking at my summary of it, and it'll almost certainly be wheeled out by other people, because it was a very good answer to the question of the question about why don't you use herd immunity plan, and this is basically the answer. Why not? What, you're going to seal off the rest of the old? But people don't actually live like that. Young people live with old people, and who would you qualify as to be shielding? How do you decide? The ethics of it, locking people away. For how long will they be locked away?
How do you stop their family visiting them? You know, I mean...
And you'd be fooling the young into thinking that they are immune and they can carry on as normal, whereas some of them will be getting long COVID, which is their lungs are done in for the rest of their lives, possibly, because they don't know.
Let's knock COVID on the head. I'm getting kind of tired of it. I feel like I've had 48 hours of it. Speculation, announcement, and then more speculation. What else caught your eye today?
Yes. One typical, just a wee one. Laura Webster and the National. Apparently, the Ferret have done a rebuttal on. You probably noticed Douglas DRoss was charging around the other week, claiming that the internal market, by voting, the SNP, by voting against this internal market bill act, when it comes into power, they're threatening 545,000 Scottish jobs that depend on being able to sell to England. Well, that's been poo-pooed, thrown out the window. It's as if, so people
it's just the Ferret fact-checking service.
Yeah, the Ferret fact-checking service.
I missed this, and it came out as false, I take it.
There is a document from I think Fraser of Allender Institute. The document says 545 jobs are directly supported and indirectly by demand for goods and services in the rest of the UK. The internal market bill's success will not in itself protect Scottish jobs, which are reliant on demand from elsewhere in the UK. Voting against the bill does not mean 545,000 jobs will be scrapped. I
would be interested to see how if they lower standards in England and we somehow manage to maintain standards in Scotland, by how much our exports to England go up because of the trusted brand Scotland will become.
And we don't really know just what figures, they come up with these magic figures all the time. We don't actually know how much of what goes in a lorry down to England then carries on through Dover and gets sold in France, Germany, Italy. We don't, these figures aren't, there's no hard figures for that.
No, and we just never will know. I noticed the thing that caught my eye was Cole Hamilton's piece in the Scotsman, where he was complaining about being reported 6 times to official bodies by various people who he describes as SNP members or supporters.
How can he prove that?
Well, that's a question that's worth asking.
But the electoral commission included.
I would just say to him that perhaps what he should do is remember how he treated Michelle Thompson, who was totally innocent of everything as well. And my mother was living in his constituency, and every piece of paper that came through the door, I would say 95% of which, there was tons of it, from the Liberal Democrats, was attacking Michelle Thompson, not
the sitting, who at the time was the sitting
MSP. Nothing about Liberal policies at all. It was, and how they afforded. I mean, I actually started collecting all the stuff that came through my mother's door, half of which was sent out by post. It wasn't just leaflets, there was letters and information booklets and God knows what. How they managed to afford it, I don't know.
Well, they do, the Lib Dems only have one strategy, shall we say. They focus on 2 or 3 constituencies and pour hot money they've got into those and ignore all the rest, which is why they only ever get a telephone. Do you remember when they had a telephone box full of MPs? David Steele and 3 others or something.
Well, yeah, but I mean, remember they've got spending limits. And I don't know how they managed to afford the postage and all this stuff.
Nobody seems to care about spending limits. And even if you get fined 500 quid. Well, if you've got 5 million coming into your party coffers, it's 500 quid.
I was very dubious about the time. I did quite a lot of tweeting about it, I have to say.
You did get upset. I'll tell you what upset me. Apparently, Pompeo, who's the Secretary of State, I believe, in America, he's a foreign fellow.
He's a god botherer.
He's a god botherer. He's trying to get the UN to change the human rights treaty or whatever they've got, an international agreement, to protect Christians. I mean, these are the people that
no. I think the word used is not Christians, it's religions. And
but he's sponsored by all these millennial evangelical Christians in America that believe the world's about to come to an end and they're elect, so they will go straight to heaven. So they don't care about the future, which is why they're not fussy about climate change.
Well, the other aspect to this is the law of unforeseen consequences. What happens to Christians in Muslim countries?
They're not just worried about going to heaven. They're not going to
What happens to Christians in Muslim countries? Is America suggesting that the rights of the dominant religion prevail sufficiently that they can start executing Christians for blasphemy, etc.?
Well, exactly. There are international protections against racial discrimination, against women, people with disabilities, and gay people. But these kind of human rights would all be swept away under Pompeo. Well,
the article was really talking about trying to change this UN charter.
That's the word I was looking for, charter.
To mirror the original Constitution of the United States.
Well, no, there's a faulty constitution as well, isn't there?
Well, it was written some time ago. So I think it would be fair to say it's a step into the past.
not half. And it was written with a fear of the British coming back.
Well, I think as well they had a genuine fear of God, didn't they?
Well, and they also had they were scared of each other. You know, they didn't actually have a United States till after they'd even won their war of independence. I've been studying a gentle version of American history, courtesy of Bill Bryson, who's very,
all right, yeah.
very funny on it.
I see Elliot Bulmer is coming to Dundee University. I can't remember where he is now. It's somewhere in Europe.
7 years he's been with a sort of an international quango on constitutions.
So hopefully we'll see a bit more of him on the media. Elliot always presents a sensible case.
He is a resident expert on constitutions, especially on a potential Scottish constitution. So it'll be very handy having him around.
Yeah, and I think it will lead to a few arguments, as I say, because Elliot is old school constitutionist, isn't he? He's
he very much the idea of putting into a constitution, a Scottish constitution, a guarantee to feed the poor would not go down well with him. That's not the sort of thing he says you should put in a
exactly. And I can see there being huge pressures in an independent Scotland on things like universal basic income being in the constitution.
These things shouldn't be in constitutions. You got bare bones is what you would call it.
No, it's your rights to change things are really what goes in a constitution.
There was also an interesting little story from Northern Ireland, which would surprise me. See that one?
Important. The Northern Ireland Assembly has voted the same way as Wales and Scotland against the.
They passed a motion rejecting the internal market bill.
Without the support of the DUP, it should be added.
Yes, the DUP and the UUP were against them, but I didn't realise there was a majority against them, but there is. Apparently it's the SDLP, Sinn Féin and the Alliance Party. And I discovered the other day that at least one member of the Alliance Party sitting in Stormont was a member of Fine Gael, or certainly one of the two big Southern Irish parties. So there seems to be, I didn't realise there was a kind of link there.
Crossover, yeah. I think Sinn Féin have had crossover as well.
And I know, I think the SDLP in the north have very strong links with the Labour Party in Dublin, which isn't very big. So yeah, it's all fine. So the SDLP motion described a trade deal between the UK and the EU as critical in protecting the interests of everyone living in Northern Ireland. I'm not going to bother telling you what the DUP said. You can make up your own story.
No surrender. I wonder what the English Parliament will vote. Oh, sorry, the English don't have a parliament. That's called Westminster. I wonder if they would have voted against it as well.
No idea at the moment. It's a good point. That question that you've just raised is underpins quite a few of the deeper essays that are floating around at the moment. I'll just reference one or two, shall I? They're too deep to cover at the moment because I need to read them back, the whole lot of them. There's Ronan Cormacian, United Kingdom Internal Market Bill and the Breach of Domestic Law. But it's a bit too long.
Where's that? That's in
the UK Constitutional Law Association. Where did I find it? Good question.
I think I maybe found it and sent it to you.
Probably.
Must have come off Twitter.
And then I see we've got another new Facebook group set up by the people like you and I who are a bit frustrated.
Ian Lawson.
No, he didn't set it up. He did link to it though.
Oh, right. Okay.
He did
What's
link
his
to
name
it.
or so?
No, he did link to it. I don't even know the name of it, so I'll have to tell you about that tomorrow.
Effectively, this is for members of the SNP
We're fed up waiting.
who want alternatives to a Section 30 route to independence,
Yeah.
set up to pressure conference decisions on this particular issue.
And
Good luck with that, lads.
And Peter A. Bell, of course, has had he's also linked to it. He has, he's written a piece. I haven't had time to read it yet. It's called, Can the SNP Change? And he does say, yes, any party can change, but I don't know what else he's had to say yet. That came out.
I think Peter's doing the cry of the left in the Labour Party really there, isn't he? What he seems to be saying is, yes, the power of the membership can change things, but there's shenanigans at the crossroads always ready to thwart the membership when the leadership doesn't agree with them.
The one thing Peter won't do is join any list party.
No, as I say, I'm still on the fence with this one. Until I see what a potential indie list party looks like, I'm going to advocate for both votes SNP.
And so have you got the clip of Devi Sridhar ready for me to enjoy, or did you not manage that?
Give me a sec.
It's only a minute and a bit, but she was being passed around. Can we go out on that one? That would be lovely, because she's very good. Who was she been? Doesn't matter who blasts her.
Is that on Sky? Yes, I do have it.
Minute and 20 seconds or something.
Yeah, I've got it here. Will we call it a day at that and go out on Debbie?
Yeah, she's always good value. Her and Linda Bald, the pair of them.
Yes, aye, she's very effective.
Professors in Edinburgh, they're doing very well for us. Well done, women.
Well, thanks for being with me, Stuart.
Always a pleasure.
I'm Norrie Stewart, and thanks for listening, folks. And we'll go
night.
out on the Devi Sridhar clip from Sky News. It was, in fact. Here we go.
That's really a fringe view. That is not the majority view. I would say the majority of scientists are aligned that maximum suppression of this virus is the optimal strategy. There's a small group of very vocal scientists who are advocating what you could call herd immunity, shield the vulnerable. But I would just push back and say we don't have herd immunity against many infectious diseases that have, been a problem for mankind for centuries, like plague, cholera, malaria, measles, TB, and I could go on. We also don't really understand how best to shield the vulnerable. Who are the vulnerable exactly? Who, the elderly we can understand, but those with comorbidities, those who are overweight. There's ethical issues about putting people away. Reinfection has occurred, so just because you get it once doesn't mean it's over with. You could potentially get it again. And the last thing is, what about long COVID? This is these young people aged 30 to 59, previously healthy, who are now suffering for months with chronic fatigue, heart issues, lung issues. I mean, why would you let a virus go through the young? It just shows complete disrespect for young people to say to them, not only are you going to have to pay for all these furlough packages and all the borrowing that's taken place, you're also going to have to endanger your health by being exposed to a virus and being part of the herd. So yeah. I actually don't think that's an appropriate way forward.
Basically, I've just realised that's where Nicola Sturgeon got her answer to the Times. Well, we'll call it a day at that. Thanks for listening and watching, folks. And we'll catch you all tomorrow. Is there an FMQs tomorrow?
There are no reason not to be.
Well, we'll see tomorrow, and we'll bring it to you if it is happening. Cheers for now, folks.